Okay, welcome everyone back to Shiur. As mentioned, the Shiur this week is Refuah Shlema for Aaron ben Rivka Leah, Moshe ben Yehudis, also sponsored by the Shangman family, Norman Teresa Mentz, and Cyril Lindy. And if you would like to sponsor the Shiur, you're welcome to speak to Rabbi Suchard or myself for good things as well. And everyone should have a wonderful Shabbos and a good Shavuot Tov afterwards.
Okay. Anyway, so tonight we just said, we thought we were going to speak about Parnasso, livelihood. And it's a really interesting subject. I hope I'll get through most of it, really what we prepared. And you know that everybody needs a livelihood. A person needs to be able to live, to have enough money, to be able to get to places where you want to get to. And and Parnasso is not a dirty word. It's actually a very important word. And you see from it from the very beginning of the Torah. It's just interesting, you know. You think of everything else, and suddenly it hits you. That you remember in Parshas Vayetze when Yaakov, when he ran away from Esau. So there the Torah tells us that he came to Hara Moriah, Mount Moriah, and he had that fabulous dream of angels ascending and descending the ladder. And the Rabbi Shalom told him that he's going to watch over him and he's going to return him to Eretz Israel. So when he woke up in the morning, so he said, if Hashem will take care of me, if Hashem will give me food to eat, right? Lechem lechol, ubeged lilbosh, and clothes to wear, and he'll return me to my father's house, then he will be for me Elokim, for Hashem, and I say, and whatever I have, I will give a tenth to tzedakah, to Hashem. But then mean to Hashem, it's the base of Mikdash, whatever it is. So over there, what did he ask for? He asked for food and clothing and a home. And that's what we all need. Everybody needs a home. Everybody needs to be able to eat. And everybody needs clothes to wear. And as you get older, person gets married, there's kids or whatever. So then a person needs more. And it's correct to ask for it. And there's going to be a few beautiful lessons. And the first lesson is to ask. Sometimes we think and connive and work out how we're going to do this and how we're going to do that, and so many plans. And we all have those plans. If I would tell you all the plans that I had before coming to Eretz Israel, and it's just things, you know, some things are dreams and some things weren't. Yeah, but we try, we plan because it's very important. And so that's one thing. And straight away, like what goes with the Parnasso is the charity. That Yaakov said, I say I surrender, Lord. I will give a tenth to you, Hashem. Person has to know, he has to share. That the person can't keep everything for himself. Now, how do we get onto the subject this week? This week, today is the most beautiful time. The most beautiful sort of and strong and important days. And that is, first of all, today, right, was Tu B'Shvat, was the 15th of Shvat. And Tu B'Shvat is the Rosh Hashanah for the trees, right? That's number one. Number two, it's Parshas B'Shalach. And in Parshas B'Shalach, you have the Parsha of the man. The man is that the manna that Hashem gave to Bnei Yisrael for 40 years in the desert. And each one we're going to speak about. And then also there's a skula, a special treasure to say Parshas Aman. Some people say it every single day. that Parsha Saman, where your person reads the Parsha from Bishalach, and then a person makes a prayer asking Hashem that a person should receive a Parnasso. And it says, but there's a skula, a special treasure, and I heard it's in the name of Hasidic Rabbi, that at this time, when it's just before Parshas Bishalach, where it's actually written Parshas Man, so when you pray for it, it's more powerful, it's more awesome. So you have these three ideas which all come to a head on this coming Shabbat, which is in 2 days' time. So it's like a very beautiful parsha. So actually, to start off with, just to mention about Tu B'Shvat. So Tu B'Shvat is the Rosh Hashanah for trees. Now it's interesting, the Mishnah mentions there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs, but one of the Rosh Hashanahs is which we keep so very carefully, is the Rosh Hashanah of our lives, right? When the Rosh Hashanah on the first of Tishri, that a person is written for a good year, a bad year, right? Is equal, it will be 50-50 until it comes to the balance, that it comes to Yom Kippur. So that's one time. That's one of the one of the 3. But why do we make such a big deal of the trees? So there's a lot of halachic laws about the trees, right? These halachic laws of the trees is that you have to have a date when you can stop pruning the trees, because up until a certain amount of time, and whatever comes from the tree, you have to give ma'aser, you have to give a tenth, you have to give all the tithes, which you have to give in Eretz Israel. And this year, on top of it all, is Shemitah. That we're only 6 months from, plus minus, from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and then we have the Shemitah year. The Shemitah year is when the land has to lie fallow. So starting with the tree itself. So the trees are magnificent. You think of a tree as tall, and the branches are turning to the heavens, right? And it brings about the midrashim things, how they're waiting for water, and as if the trees are praying to Hashem that they should have sustenance. And it teaches us the importance to take care of a tree and to take care of the land. Now I'm going to tell you, I don't know how many people over here, I mean, Dr. Kassa, we went to Yovel Boys School. Now I learned at Yovel Boys School, and I'm not sure if I learned this from there or in Parktown, but I'm pretty sure it was from Yovel Boys, because I think we had nature study. And in nature study, we learned about farmers and crop rotation. What's crop rotation? That if you're a farmer and you plant, let's say, mealies, right? So you plant mealies maybe 3 years in a row. Then afterwards you should change and you should go and plant potatoes. And then the following year you should go and plant grain. Why is it? Because it's good for the land. You can't take the land and keep using it on it until you take out the kishkas of the land, right? So now that made so much sense to me that I still remember it, right? I remember a couple of things. I remember playing soccer at Yovel Boys, and I remember getting cuts once, and I remember this, that I remember crop rotation. So now, when you think of it, it's written in the Torah. And the Torah came before the world was created. Then Hashem knew that if you want to get the best of your vegetation, and you want to get the best of your land, so you've got to allow it to rest. And Hashem gave us this din of Shemitah. And it's not easy for the farmers. And nowadays, we've been hearing over in Eretz Israel, I'm sure you're going to hear it throughout the world, they're going to offer every person to be a partner with one of the farmers, and with some of the vegetation that they're going to grow, and if you help support them, so it'll be as if you're also the farmer. You also, have this wonderful mitzvah. But what it does is it rejuvenates the land. And, being in Eretz Israel, that takes time, like you say, to acclimatize to a new land, everything. No, nothing is easy in life. Not so easy. Probably there are laws, but with there are challenges all the time. But the one thing about Eretz Israel is that at the moment, and we should continue, there is a plenty full of food. That please God, when everybody can start traveling again, the Chaparine to come to Eretz Israel, there is just unbelievable the amount of food, and everybody shares the Jaffa oranges throughout the world, and what has happened, and everything is tasty. And it's very interesting that one of the Nevi'im, they say that that's one of the signs of the coming of the Mashiach, when there's, everything is growing in Eretz Israel. And it's unbelievable that whilst the Jews had not come back, right, since after when did they really start coming back after the Second World War, and the Chalutzim. So the land had so many different people running the land. There was the British at one time, the Turkish at one time, and the Kurds at one time. But the land just didn't produce what it's producing now. And really, it's actually a godsend. So, but the idea of Rosh Hashanah, of the trees, teaches us the importance of the vegetation, to appreciate it, to appreciate the land. I saw there's a picture of different farmers that they were saying this is our land, and they were, holding the land and showing how they planted, with such beautiful dedication. So we were reading an article from Rebbetzin Mizrahi, who's come to South Africa, has spoken a lot. And interesting that she, homiletically you take out, and also in Kabbalah and different things, and they say you can learn so much from a tree, and from the planting, because when you plant, you nurture, and if you plant something and you want it to grow nicely, so then you have to have the correct soil, that you have to water it. You have to keep doing things in order to that it should actually produce, and that is the case. She says the same thing with children. Person has a family that, and she said it's the name of the Satmar Rebbe. He says that the children, he says you have children and they're small, and you have to nurture them, and then you have to keep guiding them, and you have to send them to the right schools and the right education, and that the home has to be the proper teachings and learnings of how to run a home, and then you have nachas. So it's actually so much you can learn from the trees itself, and the idea also is, to a certain extent, is not to take the kid. Maybe if a person had a servant, like in the Jewish law, you're allowed to, person was allowed to have servants, but there are laws that you couldn't beat him, that God forbid to knock out a tooth or something. Yeah, if it was raining and you only had one raincoat, you've got to make sure that your servant has a raincoat. That even if you have people where a person is in charge of people, not to take advantage and to take the kishkas out of a person, right? Which can also be in many modes of life where people have those are opportunities. But you see, you actually can just learn from, right? We send it, and like the tree laces its palms, it turns to Hashem, and we have to keep the mitzvah in the correct way. Very interesting is that we have in this week's Parsha is the Parsha of the Mon. Now, in the Parsha of the Mon is Bnei Yisrael that they didn't have, when they went out, Shem praised them, Leftach Akrai Bamidbar Be'eretz Zarua, you went, and the land which was a desert, and they didn't go with much food, right? Because they had a little bit of what they had from the Korban Pesach, and what they ate. They didn't, how much did they prepare? And there was times which was a little bit naughty, the way they asked for water, and a little bit naughty, maybe they asked for bread, and you read the Parsha. But Hashem says, look, I'm going to give you something which is spectacular. I'm going to give you man. I'm going to give you manna. Every day you go out, you're going to be able to collect man. You're going to have enough for a good 3 meals, right? At least 2 meals, the savata that you will have as much as you want for those meals. And of course, the people went out to collect. But Hashem says, don't collect from today to the next day. You don't have to worry. He says, I'll see that you'll have enough. And what happened? The people that they went out and they had enough to eat for that day, what they thought they're going to have for tomorrow, they found that it was full of worms. Right? Hashem, look, I told you guys, don't do it, not listen. Then Hashem says, you can go out 6 days, and on the 7th day is Shabbat. 7th day is Shabbat. He says, don't go out. That's Shabbat. So I'm going to give you a double portion on Friday. That'll be enough for today and tomorrow. But there were some people said 2 people, Das and Ba'aviram, who always troublemakers. Some say that it's people, the Erev Rav. That's very interesting that I heard that, there's that they blame a lot of the maybe politicians who do things very much to the left. Is they the descendants of the Erev Rav? And we spoke about last week of when the Mashiach is to come, and what's going on in Eretz Yisrael with politically there's a lot of backlashing and fighting, but it is that this is what which is brought around, and then I think they bring proofs from the Zohar and different places that it's the Erev Rav. But here they were getting their Parnasso daily, right? And Hashem said, but don't worry for tomorrow, and especially Shabbos. So, that story, you must have heard it from me, that the fella was a very successful businessman, but he kept his business open on Shabbat. So the rabbi, and it's a bad influence. So the rabbi called him up and he said, Rabbi Yosel, or whatever his name is, he said to him, Rabbi Yosel, he says, I didn't know that he was such a gunner. He says, gunner? A robber? Me, rabbi, a robber? God forbid. What do you mean? And he was insulted. He says, I pay all my workers. He says, people can borrow on credit. He says, I pay my suppliers. He says, I don't cheat, Rabbi. He says, oh, you don't cheat? He says, let me tell you, how many days are there in a week? He says, 7. He says, how many days is your shop open? He says, 7. He says, God gives you 6 days that you can work. You've got to steal from God the 7th day. That's his day. But it says in Bereshis that the Hashem rested on the 7th day. He wants us all to rest on the 7th day. 7th day is a special day. It's Hashem's birthday of the world, right? Birthday of the world, of creation. Comes once every 7 days. 7 days. We once gave a beautiful, exposition on that idea. He says, but you have such an opportunity. What do you have to chop around an extra day? And that's the same thing with Parnasso, that we have to work, and it's correct to work, and there's nothing wrong with hard work. He says, but you have to know that there's a Shabbos day of rest. You have to know that you should think of the future, but these people think that they're going to live to 300 years, how many years they have so much money in the bank. There are people, Halabai, all of us, right? But they could never eat all the steaks that they have in the they have in their fridges, right? Or they can never spend everything that they have, and becomes like kleptomaniac, that they cannot stop, and therefore you have to be able to do it, to be able to do things correctly, that comparable to what Hashem said. Don't worry about the next day. So you can worry. You worry to a certain extent till please God you live to 120 each, right? But in the last 20 years, probably you're not going to be running around watching Manchester United every game, then run to England and back and forth with planes or different things that people like to do. And then the same thing is this: what travels with Parnasso is charity. What travels with Parnasso is being kind to people, to help out on people, and that's such an important thing. And there's a true story. There's a lot of true stories, and maybe some may have seen it in Zera Shimshon, but it's a wonderful story, and it happened near where we are. And I actually heard about that there were miracles which had happened. We in Telstone, which is 17 kilometers from Yerushalayim, the whole area is called Kiryat Ye'arim, a place of forest. And there's a few moshavim, which is in the vicinity. So what happened was, and there was a fire there. We'll come back to the fire. So there was a fella a religious fella, but he loved watches. Some people that they enjoy watching, enjoy a different watch, a different kind of a watch. And anyway, there was he noticed an ad that one of the big watchmakers are coming with a $60,000 watch, which was beautiful. The way everything was exquisite about it. So he loved to have a nice watch, show to people that, right? It wasn't over extravagant. That was his enjoyment. It was his enjoyment. It came a present time to give presents. He liked to give a nice watch as a present. Anyway, he had to put it on order. Such a watch, it's not manufactured 100 at a time. And they called him up that in a week's time he should pick up the watch. He was waiting for such a couple of months. His brother phoned him the day after he got this order that he could come over and get the watch. He says that in their community there was a fire, and a guy had lost a person with many children, and a fire burnt everything. Right? And it happens in South Africa, burnt everything to a cinder. The person wasn't rich. And his brother phoned him up and he says, you know what? Do you have $50,000-$60,000 to spare? He says, you put it in, I put it in. Let's give it to this guy. It'll give him such a boost and let him put him back on his feet. So he thought, okay, what can he do? So he had to cancel the watch. Years later, he came on Aliyah, and he came to a Mashav, bought a house in a Mashav, did what he had to do, and he was away for the weekend. He came back. He heard that there was a terrible fire in the Mashav, and when he came back, he heard about it, and he raced to where his house was, and he looked around and he saw devastation around him, and his entire house had burnt marks around it, but the house was there. But a true story, because I had heard of this, I think, from one of my daughters a few years ago, and the house, and it was still there. Imagine, he had foregone his enjoyment of this watch, and with his brother had helped this person whose house burned down. He came to Eretz Israel, and the house was intact. So, what goes with Parnasso is kindness, tzedakah. A person, of course, shouldn't make himself an oni, make himself so poor that he doesn't have. Like the halacha is how much you're allowed to give. Your person's not supposed to go overboard. But if a person wants Parnasso, then the Baruch Shem will see to it that the person will get it. So we see that looking for Parnasso is something special, and we say what goes with it. But what goes with a lot is prayer. A person shouldn't feel that you're going to work everything out yourself. It doesn't work. In fact, one of my friends, I mentioned, who unfortunately had the corona virus, and he was actually very sick, and I was in touch with him all the time. And he said to me, he said, you know what? He said, without Hashem, I never would have made it. Thank God he's on the way to recovery. And it only comes from prayer. I'm sure it was his prayers. Many people have been saying to healing. But when a person prays, then Hashem helps. So that's what we learned from Yaakov at the very beginning. That Yaakov, he prayed for food to eat and clothes to wear, prayed for a home, and there's actually nothing wrong with these things. But when a person feels that he's going to work it all out himself, and he's, with his, like it says in the verse, it says, Kochi va'otzim yodi, with my strength and my brains, I'm going to work out how am I going to do it. It just doesn't work. And we're living through a time where we actually saw that so many people had they thought they had the best stocks and the best investments, and imagine all the people that the Parnasso was, traveling and bringing things in and out and traveling and going and suddenly we all locked in. Not only locked in our houses, but we locked in the countries. I mean, you can't just think you can jump on a plane and you're in Eretz Israel. I don't know what's with the South Africa vis-a-vis other countries, but over here you can't go out and you can't go in. If a person finds that they locked down, that's the thing. So just to mention those three things and to add is that we said that the importance of today is that it's we had during the week we had the 15th of Shabbat, which is the Rosh Hashanah of the trees, and therefore the importance of taking care of trees, right? And maybe like the Rebbetzin said, taking care of trees, you can homiletically and you can carry it over like the Satmar Rebbe. Imagine the Satmar Rebbe used that as an analogy, is your own children, your own way of life, how they should be brought back, because they also fruits, the fruits of the ground and the fruits of you yourself. And then we mentioned in the Parshat B'Shalach that you have all the mitzvahs of how to do and how to give with tzedakah. But I have one last thing, which I had such an interesting question. What really, while learning the Parsha, that in Parshas B'Shalach, watch out for it tomorrow, when they speak about the mon, Hashem says, I'm going to give you bread every single day. You'll be satiated. And I'm going to give you slav. Slav was like a chicken. which they were able to eat bein ha'abayim. You'll see the verse. Bein ha'abayim means in the afternoon. So it wasn't at a time where you had a lot of time to prepare it. You know what I mean? If you wanted to make a big lunch, if you want to make this, you want to do that, that you had the slab, but the slab only came at that time. The milchiks and the parav, they had the money. You could have sausages you could have made out of soya, if you wanted. But the real meat that came a little bit later in the late afternoon. But in Parshas Bahalotcha, which is in the book of Bamidbar, the fourth book, Numbers, the book of Numbers. So over there is one of the difficult times that Moshe had is when the people came and they said, you know what, we're tired of this bread that we're having every single day. We remember the meat that we had in Mitzrayim and the cucumbers that we had in Mitzrayim, the chinam, for nothing, for nothing. I mean, they were slaves, but there was a lot of complaining. It seems that it was mainly the Erev Rav, like we say, that these people that became the converts and they joined, right? They joined later to Bnei Yisrael, maybe Dasan Gavirim at the head of them, or whatever it is, like that, and they were complaining. So it bothered me, but they did have the slab, right? They had the slab, right? They had these chickens. They had food. Also they had plenty of their own animals, but maybe they're reluctant. Maybe they hope that just like it rained down with bread in the morning, all kinds of breads. Maybe it'll rain down with steaks, all kinds of steaks and chops and lamb chops every night. Maybe this is what they were getting at. But they did have meat. So what was the question? So I actually asked that to one of my kids, my son, when I learned with him, and he looked around and he says, you know what, the Ramban, Nachmanides asks the question. And he points out something, and Rashi hints to it also. He says, you're right, that they had meat, but the meat wasn't given that they were savata, that they wasn't in an abundance. It wasn't that they had enough, that they were so full they said, I can't put another chop into me, right? That much they didn't have, right? In the morning, as much as they wanted. So Ramban says, the Torah is teaching us that Hashem said, when it comes to being overindulgent in things like the meat, he says you should be happy with what you get at that time. When it comes to what you really need, for your strength and the different kinds of breads and lechem and wheat or whatever it goes like that, there you can eat until you are soveya. One is, there's a pasuk in the Torah, V'acholta v'savata u'verachta, you would eat and you'll be satisfied and you will bless. So they didn't come to the level of the savata. And the Ramban says, and there was unfortunately, Hashem gave him as much as they wanted, and the Gemara says that they made a huge brine, right? And when the meat was bein shinaim, between their teeth, that some of them received a plague. So that was the episode in the Parshas Bamidbar. So, but what does it learn? What do you teach from there? That the Ramban says a famous statement, and some mentioned it to me also when I told him. He says a person can be a maneuver b'shuta Torah. You can. What's a maneuver? We use that word. Maneuver means he's ugly, not nice. without manners. A person can be maneuvered with the permission of the Torah. What does it mean with the permission of the Torah? He says, the Torah says you're allowed to drink wine and you're allowed to have a shot of whiskey. What happens if a person drinks wine every night and he becomes a drunkard? So that's a maneuver, right? But the Torah says it's kosher, right? It's we can get it with the badats, the best heksher in you that you want. The answer is, but don't overindulge. The same thing. The Torah says you're allowed to eat meat. He says, but don't have meat. I know South Africa likes, we eat a lot of boerewors, boerewors and eggs in the morning, and then lunchtime you have something else, and then night and some more meat. You can go on and on. It's not good for a person, but it is. A person can become maneuverable with Torah. So that's, I think we covered those three topics very beautifully. I mean, because we have the sources is our Torah. The Torah has everything with it. It's just so beautiful that Parnasso is important, and a person must go out to make a Parnasso, and a person must pray for Parnasso. They have, a story where you don't stop praying. The story of people couldn't have children for famous story of 32 years. It went around the country a while. 32 years, two friends had babies, and each one had prayed for the other. But the main thing, won't go into that story. The main thing is to pray. Just like Yaakov prayed, and if he was big enough to pray, that we can keep praying. Hashem, we keep praying, and knowing that whatever we do, we salt it correctly, with the correct amount of charity, the correct amount of good deeds, and to know that even that we have what a lot, not to indulge, not to become a maneuver, not to become not mannerly with Hashem. And then Hashem, with the prayers, will certainly give us all the things, please God, that we need. And I know so many people want to come to Eretz Israel, South Africa, and we've got to find a way to do it. I keep thinking also, looking for places. The other night, I went to someone who lives in Kiryat Yearim around over here on the Moshav. Taka lives in the Moshav. I asked him, are there any, there are houses to buy, but no, not building big flats. But sooner or later, something will come that everybody will have that opportunity. Just have to keep being mispalel, and Hashem will, please God, answer that for us. Thank you.